A 68-year-old man stands in his kitchen holding a lab report. His doctor circled one word: creatinine. 30 years of the same dinners, the same seasoning habits, the same foods he's always called healthy. And in that one moment, all of it gets called into question. He doesn't even know if the number is good or bad. He just knows something he's done on autopilot for decades might need a second look. So here's the question worth sitting with for a second. Are you doing any of that too? Right now, without realizing it? Some of the foods you've trusted as healthy for decades may need a second look once kidney function starts to change. That doesn't mean vegetables are the problem. It means your kidneys, depending on how they're working these days, might have slightly different priorities than they did 20 years ago, and there's often no symptom to tip you off. The vegetable that ends up at number 1 on this list isn't here because it's packed with some rare kidney-friendly nutrient. It's here because of what it can help you quietly take out of your cooking. I'm not going to tell you which one yet. While we go through this, think about which of these 5 is already sitting in your kitchen right now. I'll ask you at the end. This isn't a ranking of which vegetable is healthiest in a vacuum. It's about which one gives you the most useful edge in a kidney-conscious kitchen, how it handles potassium when that matters for someone's situation, how much it can help with sodium, and what it lets you leave off the plate. One thing before we start: nothing here treats kidney disease, and none of it replaces your labs, your doctor, or your medication. Now that number your doctor circled. Your kidneys filter waste your body makes on its own. One of those waste products comes from normal muscle activity, and it's called creatinine. Healthy kidneys clear it out steadily. When kidney function drops, more of it lingers in the blood. That's the number sitting on that page. That number also moves around for other reasons: age, muscle mass, certain medications. That's exactly why doctors usually pair it with a second eGFR to get a fuller picture instead of judging from one data point alone. No vegetable reaches in and switches that number off. If you ever see a video claiming a food detoxes the kidneys overnight, that's a red flag. It's not how kidney physiology works. What food actually influences is the terrain around it: sodium, blood pressure, blood sugar, and for some people managing reduced kidney function, potassium and phosphorus. Stay on top of that consistently for months and you're improving your odds. You're not guaranteeing a number. You're stacking the deck in your favor. Think of it like tending a garden. You don't get a bigger harvest by staring at the soil and hoping. You water it, you give it light, you pull the weeds consistently, and over weeks the results show up on their own. Managing kidney health works on a similar timeline. It's not about a single fix. It's about showing up with the same small habits, day after day, and letting that consistency do its work. Here's a woman I'll call Diane, 71. Most of her week goes to her garden and her grandkids. At her yearly checkup, her doctor mentioned that her kidney numbers had drifted slightly. Nothing alarming, just something worth keeping an eye on. What actually bothered Diane wasn't the number. It was not knowing what it meant. Was this the start of something, or just one of those things that comes with getting older? That's usually the real fear underneath a result like this, not the number itself, but what it might mean for the years ahead. Diane didn't overhaul her life. She made small trades, fresh vegetables and herbs instead of canned soup and deli meat, and worked with her doctor to fine-tune her blood pressure medication. 6 months later, her numbers looked steadier. To be clear, nobody, including her doctor, could point to a single change and call it the reason. This is one story meant to illustrate a pattern, not a documented case, and no single food deserves the credit. That's actually the point. Diet is one of the few things you get to control every single day, even when the bigger picture is out of your hands. Cabbage lands at number 5, and that has nothing to do with whether cabbage is healthy. It is. Here's the nuance. A lot of foods labeled healthy without qualification, like spinach, potatoes, and bananas, also happen to be fairly high in potassium. For some people with reduced kidney function, potassium doesn't clear the way it used to, and depending on the person's labs and medications, it can build up. In more significant cases, that's something doctors watch closely because of its effect on heart rhythm. This isn't true for everyone with kidney concerns. It depends entirely on the individual case, which is exactly why "ask your doctor" isn't a throwaway line here. Cabbage sits in a different lane. It's relatively low in potassium and phosphorus, it's inexpensive, and it keeps in the fridge for over a week. Shred it raw with olive oil and vinegar, or saute it with garlic. Picture it next to a bag of spinach on the counter. Most people would lump both together as simply healthy greens and stop thinking about it. Their potassium levels aren't close. Cabbage also earns its spot through convenience: a slaw at lunch, a stir-fry at dinner, a soup on a cold night. It doesn't demand much prep, and it doesn't wilt in 2 days like more delicate greens. There's something else worth noticing here. Nobody ever tells you to be suspicious of a vegetable just because it's green. Healthy has become one word covering hundreds of very different foods, and once potassium is part of the equation, that word stops being useful. Spinach didn't do anything wrong. The label was just never specific enough to guide a decision like this. That's the easy win. The next vegetable has almost nothing to do with potassium at all. Number 4 is red bell pepper, and its real value isn't nutritional, it's behavioral. Picture this: it's 3 p.m., the bag of chips is already open on the counter, and you're not really hungry. You're restless, and the salty crunch is what you're actually chasing. Peppers are naturally sweet and crunchy enough to hit that same craving. That matters because sodium is one of the most direct levers on blood pressure, and blood pressure has a well-established relationship with kidney health over time. The real win isn't something magical inside the pepper. It's what happens across a year when a container of sliced peppers sits right next to the chips, and it slowly becomes the one you grab instead. This isn't about willpower. Willpower runs out by the end of a long day. What actually works is changing what's easy to reach. A pepper already sliced at eye level becomes the easy choice. A bag of chips left as the only option nearby wins almost every time. There's a broader pattern hiding in this one too. Most diet advice focuses entirely on nutrients, what's inside the food. But for a lot of people, the bigger obstacle isn't nutrition knowledge. It's the 3 p.m. moment, the tired evening, the habit that runs on autopilot before the brain even gets a vote. A pepper can't out-argue a craving. It can only make the easier option the better one, and over enough afternoons, that's often all it takes to shift the pattern. And the next vegetable solves a completely different kind of problem. Here's a man named Robert, 74. He thought he was eating well-grilled chicken, a vegetable, and most nights, a generous scoop of mashed potatoes, skin on, because he'd always heard the skin was the healthiest part. At a checkup, his doctor asked about his potassium intake, and Robert genuinely had no idea potatoes were even part of that conversation. Nobody had ever framed it that way for him before. There wasn't fear in that moment, just the realization that something he'd done automatically for decades deserved a second look. If that sounds familiar, you're far from alone. Most people have at least one habit exactly like this. That's the gap cauliflower fills at number 3. Mash it the same way, season it the same way, and it keeps that same warm, comforting texture while typically delivering less potassium than mashed potatoes. Potatoes aren't a bad food. This swap matters specifically for people who, based on their labs and their doctor's guidance, are managing potassium because of reduced kidney function. Whether it applies to you comes down to your own numbers, not this list. Robert tried the swap after his appointment: same butter, same garlic, a little cream, seasoned the way he always seasoned it. A well-made cauliflower mash can still feel like a real family dinner instead of something that tastes like a punishment. That's really the goal here. Not a bland substitute, but a swap that fits into a life someone already enjoys living. This is worth sitting with for a moment, because it's the real reason so many diet changes fail long-term. Nobody sticks with a food they resent eating, no matter how good it is for them on paper. A swap only works if it survives contact with a real Tuesday night dinner tired kids, a hungry spouse, zero patience for anything that tastes like punishment. Cauliflower earns its place because it clears that bar. Now we're leaving nutrients behind entirely and stepping into something most people never connect to kidney health: taste. Number 2 is garlic, and it earns its spot for what it replaces. Picture it: 6:15 p.m., the chicken's already in the pan, you're tired, and the salt shaker is sitting right there by the stove. That's the exact moment a habit either shifts or doesn't. Paired with rosemary, basil, or a squeeze of lemon, garlic brings enough flavor that it can make cutting back on added salt noticeably easier, not because it replaces salt's chemistry, but because taste, not discipline, is usually the real reason low-sodium eating falls apart within a few weeks. Some research points to a modest, supportive effect on blood pressure as well, which is worth knowing, though it's not a treatment on its own. Fresh minced garlic tends to bring out the most flavor, but jarred works fine when you're short on time. But garlic can only carry a dish so far by itself. The vegetable at number 1 does something garlic can't. Number 1 is onion, not because it's the most nutritious vegetable here, and not because of anything unusually powerful hiding inside it. Onion simply shows up in more savory cooking than almost anything else. But that's still not the real reason it wins. The real reason is what onion lets you quietly remove from a meal without anyone noticing it's missing. A well-caramelized onion carries a surprising amount of a dish's depth and savoriness, often the exact thing your palate is asking for when it wants salt. That makes it far easier to use less added salt without the meal feeling like something's gone. And it does this meal after meal in a way none of the other 4 vegetables on this list can quite match at that scale. That's the thread running through everything so far. Cabbage gave you a low-potassium base, pepper gave you a lower-sodium way to handle a craving, cauliflower gave you a familiar substitution, garlic gave you flavor to lean on. Onion pulls all of it together and does it consistently in almost anything you cook. Caramelizing takes a little patience but not much skill. Slice the onion, cook it low and slow, stirring occasionally until it turns soft and golden 20 to 30 minutes. Make a big batch on a Sunday, keep it in the fridge, and spoon it into soups, meats, and sauces all week. The upfront effort pays for itself many times over. Here's the catch, and it's the mistake I see most in people who think they're already doing everything right. Plenty of people assume that because a food is natural, how it's prepared stops mattering. It doesn't. Deep-fried onion rings, French onion soup swimming in sodium-heavy broth and melted cheese, cauliflower breaded and deep-fried until it's closer to a chip than a vegetable. None of those are the same food nutritionally as the plain, simply cooked version sitting a few sections back. The vegetable was never the issue. What changes everything is what it gets cooked in, cooked with, and served alongside. The ingredient was never the problem. What it's cooked in, cooked with, and served next to is where things quietly go sideways. Kidney-conscious eating isn't only about what you buy at the store. It's also about what you add once you get it home. So something to actually do with all this. Pick one meal tomorrow. Just one. Cabbage in a slaw at lunch. Peppers instead of chips in the afternoon. Cauliflower standing in for potatoes at dinner. Garlic and onion as the flavor base for whatever you're already cooking. Keep it small. Keep it realistic. Keep it something you'll actually repeat. One meal won't move a lab number it isn't supposed to. It's simply the easiest place to start something that, given time, actually can. The same logic carries over to restaurants and packaged food. A quick label check or asking for sauce on the side protects the progress you're building at home. One exception worth naming clearly. If you've been diagnosed with moderate to advanced chronic kidney disease, your relationship with potassium and phosphorus may look quite different from the general picture described here, and that threshold should come from your own labs, reviewed by your nephrologist or renal dietitian, not from a video. The same goes for fluid intake, especially for anyone managing dialysis, heart failure, or a doctor-directed fluid limit. None of these 5 vegetables are a substitute for that conversation. They're simply a reasonable starting point for someone without those specific restrictions. Back to that man standing in his kitchen. He still doesn't understand every number on that page, but he understands something now that he didn't an hour ago. One circled word isn't a diagnosis. It's a signal worth paying attention to. What actually shapes his future isn't the next meal, it's what he does across the next 1,000 ordinary ones. Nobody's kidneys are asking for a miracle vegetable. They're asking for steady, unremarkable attention, kept up for years, not days. The real goal was never a lower number by next Tuesday. It's staying independent, traveling without worry, keeping up with the grandkids at the park, staying in the home he's lived in for decades on his own terms. One salty dinner with family won't undo 6 months of steady habits, the same way one good meal won't erase 6 months of poor ones. What matters most is the pattern you keep coming back to. That's really the whole idea behind this list. Not 5 perfect foods, and not a diet plan to follow to the letter. Just 5 small, repeatable ways to make the easier choice slightly easier, meal after ordinary meal, for as long as it takes to become the way you naturally cook without thinking about it anymore. So, Back to the question I asked you to hold on to. Which one of these 5 was already sitting in your kitchen? And honestly, which one surprised you the most? Cabbage, pepper, cauliflower, garlic, or onion? Drop both answers in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which one shows up most for the people watching this, and what caught you off guard. If you want health information explained the way you'd want a doctor to explain it to a family member clearly, without miracle claims, without unnecessary jargon, subscribe. That's exactly what we do here.